and gentlemen, welcome to Bayut Real Estate Bytes with Mahmoud Al Burai. Today is our first episode in 2020, and as everyone is excited about 2020, the year of the expo, the year of opportunities, we're very pleased and honored to have with us today Mr. Haider Ali Khan, who is the CEO of Bayut.
Thank you very much.
And the Wolf real estate expert, Mohanad AlWadiya, CEO of Haider Real Estate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming today, and thank you for being part of Bayut Real Estate Bytes with Mahmoud Al Burai. And today is our first episode of 2020. And the first question, how do you see 2020?
Before I talk about 2020, I would like to talk about 2019 and maybe the decade, because 2020 is the beginning of a new decade. The way I would describe it is the first half of the last decade was very important because we've witnessed the recovery of the real estate market in the first 5 years. There were a lot of positive signs towards the recovery, especially with the announcement of the win of the Expo 2020 in November of 2013. We all recall how excited everybody was and how positive the sentiment was. The second half, however, was marked with a bit of negativity. I would call it correction, heavily needed correction. The market was witnessing a lot of imbalances in terms of demand and supply, which cascaded down to everybody, all the stakeholders within the industry. Having said that, 2019 was very interesting because it had a lot of remarkable, if you want, achievements in terms of transactions, record months in October and November, and the numbers are the proof. There were actually buyers coming into the market, an increase in transactions and volumes. So we're hoping now getting to 2020 that the momentum will continue towards this new decade and this new year, 2020. As you mentioned, Dr. Mahmoud, correctly, it's the year of the Expo. I personally call it the year of the brave, because there are incredible opportunities for the brave buyers, whether they're investors or end users.
Well, great. Just to follow up on the same trend, we're talking about 2020, and it's the year where Dubai in October is hosting Expo 2020. As Bayut leading platform of listing, it also tells us the appetite of investor, it tells us the demand. How do you see any changes? What's the trend that's going on in terms of market demand and supply?
Sure. It's interesting because the first time I actually, just go back a little bit, the first time I remember hearing about Expo 2020 was back when before it was announced, before I actually had moved to the region. And it was being, talked about as being transformative for Dubai and generally for the broader region, right? And so I think there's just been a lot of excitement over all of these years, and there's a lot of execution that's gone into place to actually make it happen, and it's finally coming close. So it's very exciting time. What we've seen on the portal, right? I mean, our traffic, if I just observe the traffic over the last year, has been increasing. The demand or the queries from buyers and the interest in browsing properties is increasing. We've seen substantial increase on the on all sides, on the rental side as well as the sales side. And I think that's backed by, as Mohanad said, that's backed by the data even from the land department where the transactions are increasing. Every market goes through cycles, right? And some cycles tend to last long, and some cycles tend to be shorter. And I think we had some quick cycles in the beginning, in Dubai, up, down, and now we're coming. What I see is we're kind of starting to have this upward swing from the kind of flat period that we've noticed over the past couple of years. So it's exciting. I think the data is backing it up, and I really look forward to seeing how 2020 works out.
Great. And the traditional question, Mohanad, do we buy now or we sell?
Definitely buy now. It's not the right time to sell. Obviously, it depends on when you bought the property you're thinking of selling and what are the dynamics related to your property. But in summary, I think now is a buyer's market. I think the imbalance between demand and supply represents great opportunities. There is a fierce competition between developers to attract buyers, whether they're end users or investors, whether they're looking for off-plan or ready properties. So this is a great opportunity for the buyers. They should jump into the market and benefit from the attractive offers when it comes to pricing, when it comes to payment plans, even post-handover, when it comes to attractive finance rates from banks. The environment that's created now are very favorable towards the buyers, not the sellers.
A question from Karina Barbas on the same area. Do you think that the prices will go higher with the Expo impact?
From experience, and this is a question that we're asked all the time, from experience and looking at the last two expos that took place in Milan and in China, yes, there will be a noticeable increase in property prices, depending on the asset classes and the locations. Whether this will continue or not, we're yet to see. I don't think anybody can predict the future. But real estate is a long-term investment asset class. So whenever you buy property, please, and this is a message to everybody watching right now, don't think short-term. God sent this asset class to us as a gift. But the mandate for it is to invest in it for the long run. It's a marathon. Don't think short-term, because that's where you fall into the traps of losing money because you sold at the wrong time or you got wrong advice. Just think long-term. Real estate will always deliver very good returns on the long run.
So I visited Shanghai back in the early 2010-11 period, and if you look at Shanghai, 2010 Expo I believe was in Shanghai.
Correct.
And if you look at Shanghai, there's old Shanghai and there's new Shanghai, and the new Shanghai was the seed of that was the Expo. Right? So I think it's interesting because even the location is interesting because it's a bit further away over here from the downtown area and Sheikh Zayed area. So I view it as another seed that's being dropped, and as we pull in more people and they become more aware of the country and Dubai in general, I think that's going to start growing from that area outwards. So I think there's a lot of infrastructure investment that actually goes in. The Expo is not just to get people in, it's actually, there's a lot of development that's gone towards that, there's a lot of infrastructure that's being built, which bodes well for future growth, right? And I would completely agree that it's a long-term, it's a long-term play. The question is, okay, are the prices going to go up when? This year, next year, 5 years from now, right? And if you look at, by any measure, if you look at Dubai as a city and you look at the cost per square foot versus other metropolitan cities across the world, everything points that it should go up, right? Because it's underpriced, right? So, but it's a question of time. Right?
Just building on this point, the fiscal budget for Dubai for 2020 was 66.8 billion, which is the highest in the history of Dubai. And we all know basics of economics. When the government starts investing in the infrastructure or in the fiscal policy or in the budget for their country, that will definitely have a positive impact on all the economical sectors. And real estate is one of the biggest sectors for the Emirates. If you look at the 10 years study done to evaluate the impact of the Expo 2020 on Dubai, we're talking about a number of, if I believe it was around 122 billion dirhams, which is almost 12 billion dirhams a year, which is fantastic. And with that comes almost the creation of almost 1 million new jobs over the decade of that Expo. And this for me is a very good indication that demand will catch up. When you create jobs, when you have a healthy population growth, your problem with supply will be resolved naturally.
Well, I see a lot of positivity, and I hope that everyone see the positivity. I mean, we've seen on ground His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the ruler of Dubai, Prime Minister of the UAE, Vice President of the United Arab Emirates, have introduced several new changes in the way that Dubai even is governed. So we have now Dubai Council, which is becoming the future council of Dubai that plans for the future. We have now a new thinking about real estate in the light of quality of life. So real estate has been bundled with the Road and Transport Authority and other authorities that work in the functionality of quality of life. So Dubai is now looking at real estate more of a quality of life, more
Correct.
of happiness agenda, more of a smart agenda. Do you see an impact of such directions with even the planning committee for real estate that
Correct.
His Highness started to plan the supply and control what can be controlled to have a more sustainable Dubai? Do you think this is going to have an impact or already having an impact?
I think it's already having an impact. 2019 already witnessed, I believe, maybe half of the number of new launches that happened in 2018. This is because of natural dynamics of the market, demand and supply. The developers started realizing that they need to slow down the momentum. Plus the interference of the government and all these new brilliant ideas to actually help regulate the market and make it more sustainable will have a positive impact on the short, mid and long term. I believe this is also grounds for creating a healthy environment to attract also institutional investors. So I'm expecting to see more REITs, more crowdfunding platforms being launched, because these institutional investors automatically get attracted to markets that are heavily regulated or where they feel that there is long-term planning. Dubai also introduced a 50-year, or the UAE introduced a 50-year plan, which is something fascinating, right, for any investor, individual or institutional. But this is one of the mandates of institutional investors. They need to see stability, long-term planning, investment in the infrastructure, and well-regulated markets.
I just want to remind our audience that you can send your questions in all social media, Facebook and Instagram, right? LinkedIn, I think it's not working, right? So apology for LinkedIn. Question, Haider, which areas in Dubai now are the best to buy, or which areas you see from the trends that has a lot of buyers and demands and inquiries?
Yeah, when I was younger and I was looking for a home myself, I was in the U.S. and the broker that I was working with, he said that there are only three things that matter, and he said location, location, and location. Right? So so look, I mean, I think it really depends on your perspective, right? If you're looking to buy and you want to live in it, that's one perspective. If you're looking and you want the rental returns on it, that's another perspective. If you're looking to buy and you're cash strapped, or you can't put the down payment, but you can possibly buy with a developer kind of financing and stretch out the payment period. It really depends on what perspective you're trying to solve, right? So if you look at it from if you're looking for buying from a personal use perspective, I think the traditional areas which are more populated, Dubai Marina on the apartment side, downtown, right? Qudra corridor, right? Where you have Arabian ranches, and so those areas, because it's community living, most facilities are there. They will always do well, right? Now, if you look at the split in the transactions for last year, off-plan did a little bit north of the secondary market or the existing home market, and there could be many reasons for that. One is obviously they're pretty amazing payment plans being provided by developers. So as I said, it's easier on the pocket. You don't have to put down a 25% down payment, and the perhaps one of the things that you have to live with is that it's not going to be available for 3 years or 4 years. So if you're looking for those, there's plenty of areas. Dubai Hills did well, right? Dubai Land in general, that whole area did really, really well. So it really depends on perspective. And interestingly enough, if you just look at our stats, like the best rental yield that we saw, it comes out of International City. Okay, so affordable properties, and it gives you north of 9%. Right now, so going back to the location aspect, like if you want to live in Dubai Marina, but if you want to buy a property that you want to rent out, perhaps buy it in National City, and buy it 2 or 3 at the price of maybe 1 or 2. So it's just really, I think that whereas if you're looking for a long-term investment, perhaps picking up something that's not built yet and expect the premiums over the next 5 years.
Appreciation over time.
Exactly, right? So I think there are many different perspectives, but if you're looking for yourself, go with the areas that are already built, and then if you're looking for other reasons, then I think there's plenty of them.
Great. So this is what we call know yourself, and you know what's your objective. What is it that you want to achieve? Is it for your own use? Is it for rental? Is it for yield? Is it long term? And this is I think Mohanad, you
Yes.
authored this book, right?
I
It's
covered
called Landlording, right?
landlording. I covered a lot of these questions in the book actually.
So I know I've read this book and I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of these questions. You answered them. So
Correct.
what's your advice for people who want to buy in Dubai and they're not sure what they want to buy?
I think I'll just echo what Haider correctly mentioned is you need to understand your objective. If you're going to buy to live, there are certain areas that will be more suitable for you. If you're buying for investment, there are different areas. And to just give an insight about this, the total transactions of 2019 were around 42,000 transactions. Out of that, 18 were for ready properties and 23 were for off-land properties. The reason for that is because of the attractive offers. Now, that had a mix of both buyers. The areas, for example, the top areas, as you mentioned, were downtown, Dubai Hills, Dubai Creek Harbor, which are mostly off-plan. You had Dubai South gaining a lot of momentum on the top area transactions. My advice for people who want to buy to live, definitely look at your lifestyle, because I always say people don't buy real estate, they buy the lifestyle. If you're going to live in that property, look at your requirements, your family requirements. Where is your work, your children's school, where do you go shopping, look at your lifestyle and buy according to that. And most people are attracted usually to the areas that have the existing platform in terms of infrastructure. They have the facilities, it's built, and these are the areas that we all know, downtown, Dubai Marina, and these areas. If you go to the outer ring, it becomes very interesting. The outer rings represent excellent opportunities for investors and end users with a limited budget. The reason for that, I'll just give you a few reasons why people are considering the outer rings. One, you will find that the prices are lower because the cost of land is lower. So automatically you have cheaper properties per square foot in these areas. The service charges are also usually typically lower there, and Dr. Mahmoud, you can build on that. Basically because most of these projects are catering for the affordable segment, and they're not very picky about the facilities and amenities within the communities. You'll find that the yields are very high. Why? Because you're buying at a cheaper price, yet there's very high demand. That's another factor. Over 1.1 million people commute every day to Dubai to work, but they cannot afford to live in Dubai. So if we build enough affordable housing for them, they will be attracted to live in Dubai, and that's the demand we're looking for as landlords, as an investor. You will see that the potential of capital appreciation in these outer rings is very high because the infrastructure is not developed yet. Dubai is investing over 33 billion dirhams in infrastructure projects, and the lion's share will go to the outer rings. So if you combine all of these factors, the high demand, the low price per square foot, the cost of ownership or annual service charges, the potential of capital appreciation, this becomes a winning destination for anybody looking for return on investment. Or even families who don't mind driving 10-15 minutes to get to the center, but get great value for money. So this is in a nutshell how I would summarize, the answer.
I want to come back to Haider. You talked about international city, and we have a question from Harry. Harry says, I invested in international city. The returns are high, but I see there is a big drop in prices. Do you think that this will impact the return that I'm receiving? So this is from Harry Knowles.
Okay, so hi Harry. So look, I mean, I don't know what price you bought at, when you got into that, and as we talked a little bit earlier, which is the pricing of any area, it's going to go through cycles. Right now, we kind of have been in a depressed cycle where things have come down over the last 3-4 years. Nobody can exactly promise you when it's going to really kick up. But if you look at, I think if you just look at a lot of things that we talked about over here, as in, you have Sheikh Zayed, you have 311 and 611, and all these corridors are getting filled up. And as these corridors get filled up, and there's scarcity of space, naturally things will start coming up. And there's a lot of infrastructure investment going in. So when and a lot of new developments popping up. So essentially, if you're looking at are the prices going to go up next year? I can't say. I don't know. Maybe you guys would know better. Maybe you can share your opinion. But if you look at and your yields are good, which what that tells me is whatever you're paying towards your mortgage or whatever you've paid, you're doing better than that, right? So, because this part of the question was, the yields are good, so I assume that your yields are good. So that just means just sit tight, you're enjoying the yields, keep enjoying the yields, and then let the market bring itself up.
The traditional question, should we buy an existing property or off plan, is the same question we've been asked last year as well. Does it make more sense for you to buy an off plan or an existing? And in terms of incentives, do you think the current incentives goes in which direction?
Yeah.
Do we have incentives for off plan as opposed to the existing, or vice versa?
I think you'll find, just answering the second part of the question, you'll find more incentives towards the off-plan projects. They're heavily incentivized to push the states in the off-plan, and we've seen that it's working. Last year it worked very well. I come from the school where I always say, don't buy fish in the sea, buy ready properties. Obviously there are the other argument, the other side of the equation, where people come and tell you, I'm going to mention the benefits of off-plan. When you buy off-plan, you get cheaper properties by almost 10 to maybe 20% than the ready properties. They always try to sell you the fact that you're going to be the first owner. It's a brand new property. Plus you get the warranty, because every project is covered by the DLP, defect and liability period, for 12 months. So these would be if you want, the main highlights that they're going to attract you with. On the other hand, you're risking the fact that the project might be delayed. You're risking the fact that the outcomes that you were promised might not be met 100%. And we've seen cases. I mean, I know that Dubai Department and RERA are very strict, and they're really trying to regulate the development sector, but we still hear about developers being late, and some of them are not just secondary developers, prime developers. Plus you get issues with the quality. If you calculate the delay versus the discount that you got, you see that you're not gaining much. The solution, in my opinion, there are now opportunities with ready properties that are offered with flexible payment plans. And because of the demand and supply imbalance, because of the fierce competition we spoke about earlier between the developers, you will find projects with great value for money that are ready, available, and they are offered to you with payment plans that stretch up to 20 years without involving any banks or heavy down payments. There are golden opportunities in Dubai today that I dare say are not available anywhere else in the globe.
Rima is asking something in that regard, saying, can I buy a property without a down payment?
Yes, she can,
So,
and it can
with
be
zero down payment?
zero down payment and a ready property. And this is, I'm saying that because I've worked on projects like that, and they are available in Dubai, where there is no risk. You're buying ready properties with a payment plan. You're not involving a financial institution. It's direct finance from the developer or the seller. And Dubai Land Department and RERA has actually created the platform to regulate these transactions. So today you can have two parties, individuals, buyer and seller. They don't need to involve the bank, but Dubai Land Department is issuing for them a title deed to govern this transaction. So this is also something that I would like to thank Dubai Land Department for, and RERA, because they're really showing incredible speed and empathy towards the market requirements. And this is something that is one of the main pillars of the success of the Dubai real estate market, is the fact that the Dubai Land Department and RERA are actually always coping and building the right legal infrastructure to accommodate all the market dynamics.
While the team is working to help us with the questions, send us the question. I have a question from Farida. How do I know how much my home is worth? Haider, let me tell you what I do. Usually, I try before I see the prices in the market, I go to the platforms like Bayut and I look at the different listing. Usually listing is not the actual transaction prices, but it tells you something about the price and how much it is now sold in reality. So, from your experience, how do we know as end users how much the prices are? Do we just look at the listing and this is the final price, or we still can negotiate and bargain and so on?
So, and I'll use another personal story here. When I was selling my first own house that I used to live in, I thought it was a certain value, right? And I put it at a certain value. And the realtor that I was working with said that it shouldn't be that much, it should be less. I said, no, my house is worth this much, right? And I said, okay. And that's essentially because it's an emotional thing, when you're selling it, right? So you put it at a price where you think this is what my house is worth. But the reality is your house is worth what the market is willing to pay for it. Right? That's just the reality. And it took a little while to realize that, and then lower the price, and then property went. So, typically when you see prices that are being advertised on like for example in Bayut, this is what is the sentiment of the seller. And depending on how good a job a broker has done with the seller in terms of getting it to the right point, would reflect how far they are from the actual market price. I think we've been analyzing a lot of data. We're looking at the transaction data from the department. We're trying to see how to couple that with really trying to get the market to understand better where the pricing should really be. The best way to do this is so for example in the US, you have the registry that just shows the exact price, and because that is what the market is doing, right? So when I look at advertised listings, I always assume that there's a slight emotional angle to this, right? And then there's obviously room for bargaining. So I would start with that and start thinking that you can get it better. As a buyer, I would think that I can always negotiate the price now, right? And the broker's job at the end of the day is to bridge that gap.
So sorry for some technical issues that the live was cut for a while, so we're back. Sorry for that. I noticed that there's something. So Haider, I want to say something on this because you and Bayut did something called check on. There are a lot of fake listing, right? And
Yes.
people sometimes, the prices are too low and too down. But when you go and contact the broker, he tells you this is sold already. I will give you something else more expensive and so on. So what do you do as a platform to give people the credible kind of view of the market prices?
Sure. So I think what we realized was, and even as end consumers ourselves, what I realized was that when you go out there, there's two questions. One is the property the right property? Is it an actual property? But then I think the more important thing also is that is it available? Because what you don't want to do is you want to get to a property and then somebody says, well, actually, this one is not here. I have something else over there. Let me show you, right? Because I saw the pictures for this one. I actually came to see this one. I didn't come to see something else. So it's very, very important to tackle both the authenticity of the property itself, and it's very, very important to make sure that the property actually is available. Right? Because I don't want to drive out there to see a property that's not available. I don't want to go even look at pictures of a property that's not available. It's a waste of my time. And what we did with TrueCheck was to put the power of making sure that the property is available in the hands of the brokers. And what it does is, what I see is it raises the level of service, because if brokers can advertise properties that are truly available, so essentially the way it works is, we get all the documents for the property, we authenticate the property actually is a true property, and the broker has permission from the landlord to advertise it. But then we say, okay, you know what? You are going to go and show this property to people who are interested in the property. So you're actually already making visits, which they should. They should accompany the end user to the property and make the visit with them. While they're there, they can just authenticate the availability every time they go there, right? And then we reflect that on the platform. So what that means is that a property, if you're looking at Bayut and it says TrueCheck, you can click on that and it says when the broker was kind of last there. So when they actually visited the property, which means if they visited a day ago or 2 days ago, it's likely available, right? At the end of the day, we want to build, we want to work with the land department, we want to work towards a system where this is not even, every property is available. Right? That's the future that we hope for.
I have a question that I want to give to Mohanad, not because of the question, but because of the name of the person who sent it.
Sure.
So it's similar to your
sister's
name. Sorry, not sister, daughter's name.
Camilla.
Yeah. So the question is, what about if the developer did not deliver the project on time? So I think they're referring to off-plan.
Yes.
Right?
If the project is not delivered, what I advise you to do is before you actually sign with any developer, you need to read your contract, the sales and purchase agreement, the terms and conditions, you will find that there is always a clause about handling situations like this. They usually grant the developer, or the contracts usually include a term which allows developers to be late for 12-month period. Beyond that, you are entitled to take legal action. And by legal action, and this is a message to everybody, I know you're going to like it, please don't go to RERA or DLD, because they're not the right jurisdiction to handle these cases. You have to go to court, or the specific, whatever is mentioned in the contract, whichever legal party you have to go to raise a case. Most of the time in Dubai, it's the Dubai courts. You go there, raise a case, and you will see that most of the time that the developers will come with you and will offer you one of two options. Either a settlement to move you to another project that they have that is ready, or offer you a credit note or a refund. So most people don't know, and they sit waiting for a year or 2 or 3, and they start complaining and being negative about it, or they go to RERA and say, help me, Well, the advice starts by reading your contract, making sure you understand your rights and your obligations, and be very specific about clauses related to delay. If you take my advice again, I would say buy ready property.
But I always say, we always say only deal with developers and brokers and property managers, all kind of service providers in the real estate industry that are trustworthy. So you can always check on the credibility of developers. Have they delivered the previous projects on time? They have good history. And usually people don't read their contracts, Mohanad. This is an issue we've been always facing in the real estate industry. So it's important to read your contract, see what is your right, what is your duty, what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do.
I think I just a small thing. Sure. I think we've become so trained on our phones and gadgets now to accept any terms and policies. I don't know how many times you guys read privacy policies when they pop up, you're like, accept cookies, right? Well, this is a real estate transaction. You should read this one.
Definitely, it's the biggest investment anybody will make in their life.
Just go through it. It might take 30 minutes, an hour, but just go through that.
I meet a lot of people who say, when they showed us the brochure, it shows swimming pools, it shows landscaping. When we get the reality, we get something smaller in size, without a view, without. So this is all in your contract.
That's why they should, as you mentioned, Dr. Mahmoud, visit previous ready projects of that developer, read reviews about them, ask for testimonials, and check their maybe show apartments or show villas that they have to get a feel, a gist of what they will expect. But again, I know I'm repeating myself. I always advise people to buy ready properties.
And I think it would be, if I may suggest, I think it would be a great initiative if there was some sort of a ranking index, or a credibility index that's launched by the land department, which brings that transparency to the market also, right? Which is based on, in other countries you'll have a Better Business Bureau, and people will go in and look at their rating, and those kind of things, because actually it builds confidence in the business.
I think there is an initiative in land department, and I'm sure it will happen. So there will be such projects going on there. A question was by a businessman, and I don't want to ask Mohanad. Because this guy who wants to compete.
No problem.
Abdullah says, do you recommend opening a real estate agency as a business now?
Look, if you're going to, I don't believe, by the way, I believe in abundance. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and it's enough for everybody. So I think it's the right time, but only if you're willing and ready to offer exceptional customer service. Because at the end of the day, if you're a real estate brokerage company, property management company, FM, or owner association management company, you are a service provider. And in a city like Dubai, the standards are so high. If you're going to enter such a competitive market with great potential, you have to understand that this is not a side gig that you want to do while working as a full-time employee somewhere else. This is a full-time job, and it requires a lot of hard work, planning, the right human capital, the right legal and the right technology involved to succeed. So the answer is yes, but make sure you're ready.
Then I want to ask you something a bit not related to this. It's a competitor market. Turkey from Saudi says do you think that Saudi market competes with the UAE market at this point of time? And I know that Bayut also exists in Saudi, so can you tell us?
I mean, we just started up in Saudi, right? And about 6 months ago, and I see the markets. They're different markets, right? Because so if you look at Saudi, if you look at the Saudi market, you know what is? I mean, it's a big country. It has a very large local population, right? That needs to be serviced, right? So the problem that you're trying to solve is or the issue that you're trying to work towards is providing housing for the masses, right? For the local masses, right? And so there's a lot of infrastructure development that's going in and providing that housing for that market. UAE is you know, Dubai has a very global appeal. You have investors from all over the place coming over here, and I see it's a home to a lot of expat residents. Right? So the dynamics of the market are very different. So if there was another geography that was similar in the population dynamics, then I would say, okay, we compete, they're competing. But I think there are different problems being solved.
But as a Saudi investor, I can invest in my local market, I can invest in Dubai. We've been having a lot of Saudis who invested in Dubai. So they're asking this question for them as Saudis, if they invest in the Saudi as opposed to Dubai, or maybe they have to diversify their portfolio.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, I was just going to say that,
Yeah.
you know, you diversify your portfolio, right? You invest here, you invest there. You know, as an investor, you want to spread it out, right? And then you want to look at your overall portfolio gain, right? And because if you limit it to one thing and it goes through a tough cycle, well, hopefully something else hedges it. Yeah. But if the hedge is the next door apartment, it's not hedging it, you know. So that's the way I look at it, right? So.
Just adding on that, I think diversification is very important, but they also need to evaluate the opportunities available at hand, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or in Bahrain or in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Ajman. There are so many opportunities. Just look at the fundamentals, and there are over 25 criteria that you must take into consideration when buying a property. So it's the biggest investment you make in your entire life. So study the opportunity, each opportunity against these criteria, and then you'll find the answer. It could be here, it could be in Saudi Arabia, but I confidently can tell you that Dubai right now is ticking almost 90 or more percent of these points very positively vis-a-vis any other market globally, not just within the region. So the answer goes back to the opportunity. If it's in your hometown, look at it. Look at one simple criteria is the legal framework relating to RERA and the efforts that you're doing. Do you have a robust legal framework and infrastructure to support your venture into buying a property, even if it's in your home country? That's one of the criteria. And compare it to the other opportunity you have at hand. And then go through the process, you know, as you go, evaluate it. It's a rational decision more than an emotional decision. Even buying a home that you want to live in, most people say it's an emotional decision. No, it's a rational decision that serves an emotional objective later on.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that the most, again, you know, what are you really after? I always will question that, right? Are you after rental yields, right? Find the best rental yield, right? And this time, I think Dubai has some of the best rental yields across the region, right? So, but if your need is you want to be more local, you want to have it in front of you, you know, look close by.
Great. I want to move a little bit to we only have 20 minutes, to short-term rental. I have a couple of questions from landlord side, from tenant side. There is a legal part of it, but before going to the legal part, do you think, as landlord, is it worth it? I mean, what is it they should do? Rent it out to short-term tenants and get higher return, or have a more of a long-term tenant with a lower return? What is the trend?
I think to answer this question, you need to look at first a macro level, then go into the actual property. From a macro point of view, Dubai is, and hopefully with the Expo and beyond, will always be a favorite destination for business or leisure visitors and tourists. So with 25 million visitors only in 2020 because of the Expo, or the 6 months of the Expo, there will be definitely very high demand for serviced and furnished, obviously, residential units. And I don't think the hotel or the hospitality sector in Dubai will be able to fulfill the demand for that period and beyond. So there will be high demand for this sector, and that's why we've seen an emergence in holiday homes, and we've seen the government also creating incentives for developers to develop 2 and 3 and 4-star hotels, because most of what we've seen in terms of supply was 5-star hotels. Not all the visitors that will come to Dubai will be 5-star tourists. They will require, the lower segments, so and bigger units. That's where the holiday home sector comes in, and that's why we've seen in the last maybe year or so the emergence of holiday homes in Dubai, Airbnb, and also individual initiatives. And again, the policy sectors were very proactive and got involved very quickly to regulate this sector. Now, going into a specific opportunity to answer a specific landlord, the answer I think boils down to your asset, your property. Because I've seen a lot of owners come to me and say, I would like to turn my unit into a holiday home unit, but it's somewhere in down in Dubai land, JBC, or somewhere where the infrastructure is not ready. It doesn't lend itself to holiday home, tourists. So it fails. It will fail miserably, if you actually plan to convert your unit there. But if you have a unit in a prime location, overseeing a landmark or overseeing the sea or a waterfront, property, then yes, maybe it lends itself towards the holiday home sector. Having said that, you also need to make sure that you have the right operators. And until now, honestly, I'm saying this very objectively, I have not yet dealt with a holiday home operator in Dubai that is up to the, if you want, average expectations that compared to what we see globally. They're still operating as amateurs. They're all very new. I've dealt personally with a lot of them, and some of them are owned by mega developers. I've personally, I don't want to name the companies, but I've dealt with holiday home operators owned by some of the top developers in the UAE, and to say the least, they're very bad. They don't really deliver. So I think there is a lot of work to be done from a service provider's point of view to live up to the standards and expectations of the city of Dubai.
But I think, Mohanad, legally, as a homeowner, you can do it yourself without an operator.
I agree.
But in terms of return, does it really, from your market
yes, if you have
research, does it give higher return?
Yes, 100%. If you have the right property, in the right location, as I mentioned, it suits that purpose. And if you have the right operator, whether it's you, and by the way, it's not a walk in the park, it's a very demanding job, because you have a whole ecosystem that you have to create for a tourist to come and stay in that unit. So if you have the right operator, whether it's you or a service provider, then, and obviously you have a property that has the right qualifications, going back to the first point, then yes, it will be, definitely will generate higher returns. I would say on an average, depending on the size of the unit and your purchase price, it will get you at least maybe between 30 up to 40% higher ROI compared to a standard rental property. And just to add another advantage, we have an oversupply in the luxury residential segment in Dubai. This is something we cannot hide from, it's a fact. We have a shortage in affordable housing, but when it comes to luxury, we have abundance of supply. So a solution could be to convert some of these luxury units located in prime locations with good views to holiday homes, because there is demand there. So it could be also a solution for landlords who are stuck. They don't know what they're doing. They've been waiting for months with vacant units being very high service charges for these luxury properties. The solution could be to convert it into a holiday home for them. It's not just about increasing your returns, it's about really finding a tenant for your unit.
Sure.
Did you have any section on Bayut for short-term rental? And if it does, there's a question on Ijari from Sabina. Do we get Ijari on short-term rental? I'm not sure if you want to take the second one.
I think that probably be better.
Okay.
We do have a section for short-term rental, but and then you can go and specify what you're looking for. You're looking for day, daily rental or weekly rental or monthly rental. One thing that I wanted to emphasize that Mohanad also talked about, which was, if you're going to go convert this into a short term, everything, or whether there was an earlier question about real estate agencies, everything needs to be run like a business.
100%.
Right. Like, so, the level of service, the better level of service provided, the better reviews you get, the more people you're gonna get in, the higher your yields are gonna be, right? So that just has to be done as efficiently and as properly as possible, right? I think people think that, I can just have an apartment here and I'll just rent it out and it's gonna make me money. It's just, the world doesn't work like that, right? Yeah.
Mohanad, on the legal side, although I know you're not a lawyer, but I'm sure
I'm not, but
this question and similar question in the same
Yes.
area. There is Ahmed Abaza. He says,
Do you want to address the Ijari?
it's related. I own an apartment in Dubai Marina and I want to let out one of the bedrooms for short-term rental. What is the procedure and do we get also an Ijari? So the same question on short-term and Ijari.
Yes. Look, I think first I want to talk about the concept of shared accommodation, which is something that has been emerging a lot. It's happening a lot, especially in the luxury locations in Dubai, the main districts, because obviously tenants are not able to live in them single afforded. And going back to the fact that we have a shortage in affordable housing. This is illegal. I know it's happening, but it's illegal to have a unit with shared tenants in it. And I'll just give you an example. What happens if the main tenant has a fight with one of the subtenants or somebody renting a unit and wants to kick them out? They don't have a legal representation or a legal documentation to be present in that unit. So they will be actually in trouble. So and also it exhausts the assets. The assets are not built to have 10 people in the unit, right? It's built to have a single family. The usage of the actual common areas will be affected. The lifestyle will be affected. So it's not healthy on a social level or on a legal level, or even, I know financially it makes sense because you're getting tenants, but on the long run, the financials will be affected because your service charges will go high because of the overusage of the asset. So this is first answering him about this. I know Airbnb allows for that. You can rent a unit. From my point of view, from my experience, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's illegal, but this is something for the policy setters to sort out with Airbnb. I know that they're allowing it for the full unit to be leased, but not as a room, to answer the gentleman who asked. In terms of the legal documents you get, there is a whole site related to this and that's what I mentioned earlier. The policy setters have created the platform, the legal framework for landlords and tenants, short-term tenants, where they can have their own documentation. It has to be registered with the tourism board. They have like a whole documentation and a process and templates to regulate that, and even licenses to regulate it. So it's not your typical ijari, typical rental process that you follow. This falls under the hospitality sector, the serviced, furnished units. On long term, yes, you fall under the ijari. Even the taxes are treated differently. You pay VAT on hospitality units or hotel rooms, but you don't pay on long-term residential. So they are two different. The question is actually not fair because they're two different assets. They need to actually study this, and I prefer they work with a licensed professional service provider to help them go through it, or study it themselves if they're going to operate it per se.
Craig asking, is there a specific license if I want to lease short term? I think we talked about the Dubai Tourism Department, and it's an easy process.
Yes.
There was today a very interesting article in the news saying that Dubai Tourism Department issued a circular saying that no developer can prohibit short-term rental and holiday homes. So I think holiday homes is going to go ahead of Expo, but there will be more maybe regulation, more licensing issues.
It has to, because as I mentioned earlier, the current supply of hotels will not be enough, and even the mix of supply, it's all towards the 5-star, that they have to find a solution. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to accommodate the demand that's coming. So I salute them again. They're being very proactive doing that. And I think the message they're sending is to a specific developer, which I don't want to mention. It's one of the top developers who actually attempted to restrict owners from renting short-term within their one of their main master developments, which I think is...
there's always a point from the developer side. Usually developers say that in the building management statement or in the master community declaration, it shows clearly, even when they sold it in the SPA, that holiday homes. So everyone has his opinion, but the government regulator said this is going ahead. So
Yes.
great news, I
Great
think,
news.
right?
I agree.
Connor Watts asking question: how do I know that I'm investing in an area that will remain popular? How do I know that?
See, you have to look at, I mean, to look, nobody can predict the future, but to understand what might happen, you have to look at the past, right? That's the way, I look at it. Again, if you're looking to invest and you have a 5-year or 10-year horizon, you can easily, like for example, you can go to Bayut and you can look at our index, which basically will give you a history back to 2012 and you can see how things are going. And you can even start seeing things where they might be cycling through and coming up. So if you're going to look at data, then look at the data and see what's happened and where things are today and what the potential is. Because clearly, when you in up and down cycles, price went up, price came down, it has the capacity to go back up, and it will go back up. It's not a question of if it will go, it's a question of when it will go up. And when it does go up, it's going to continue, right? Because what I've seen is that the way the market has is there were a few wild swings and this volatility is getting smaller, but the trajectory I see in the long run is upwards, right? So you have to have that. And coming to the specifics of this question, okay, what location? I would say again, Dubai Marina, if you look at that whole area, it's always going to be popular. It's popular among tourists. If I just look at our search trends, if I just look at Dubai Marina alone generates more queries on Google than a lot of the rest of the locations combined together, right? Why? And not just from here, from all over the world. Right?
Just to build on that, I think there are other criteria they should take into consideration, but this is definitely one important factor to look at the history and the trends. I think they should look at potential attractions. For example, whenever you have a very healthy business hub or a business center or a retail attraction, you usually find that residential communities start developing around them. For example, when Media City, Internet City, and Knowledge Village were built, they were at the outer rings of Dubai. Very soon, Emirates Living started catering for them. Dubai Marina started catering for them. When Dubai Marina was built, before they had the JBR strip, the retail strip, it was actually not that popular. Then it became popular. When you have key touristic attractions, business attractions, or retail attractions, you know that this is an indication that this area will lend itself to becoming a favorite or sought-after destination. The other very important factor is the master developer. They're building it. And I think we all know there are certain massive developers, whenever they take over a community or a project, you feel that this is going to be successful because of their history and because of their place-making strategies. Some developers have positioned themselves as fantastic master community developers where you go to their communities, you feel the buzz. And they actually create it as a mini-city. They create the whole attractions to make sure it becomes a sought-after destination.
Mm-hmm. I have 5 minutes. I have so many questions. We'll make
short answers.
Yeah. So the first question is, in terms of renewal for Ijari, some brokers charge 500, some brokers charge 200.
Quick answer: the law is very clear. It's 200 dirhams. Anything above that is illegal.
So complain to RERA if you get higher.
Yes,
right?
and the violating brokerage company or property management company will get fined for that.
Yeah. Someone he says, I have a new company. Shall I rent an office or buy an office?
I mean, that's a very balance sheet specific question, right? I mean, that's like we rent an office.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Can we buy an office? We can buy an office, but then we're gonna kind of capex it. So it's just a question of are you looking for gains? What are you looking for? You're trying to save money. At this point, I mean, I think and it depends on the stage of the business. So it's very difficult to answer that question. I mean, if you're early on rent, if you're more established, you have the cash flows.
I agree. It depends on your situation, your financial situation, and also your plans for the mid or long term. And a very important other factor is the cap rate, the rent yield that you're generating right now if you buy it versus rent it. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to even buy it, continue renting it if the yield is very low anyway.
Great. And I think maybe they're coming from a view that they can get very good prices nowadays and this is a long-term investment. if their business is going to be long-term.
Long-term,
business.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, buying it for your own business, you
Yeah.
want to buy it and rent it out. I mean,
But if you have the financial means to do it, some companies prefer to keep their cash flow invested in the business itself to develop a core business.
Great. Are we going to see more affordable or luxury projects in 2020?
I think my answer would be more affordable. I think already the developers have picked or depicted this industry and consumer trend, and they're riding the wave.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. A question this is great news. I like this question. Why? Because it tells us the opportunities that Expo 2020 will bring to Dubai. It's from someone, JT. I'm planning to move to Dubai for Expo 2020. If I get a co-working space, will that cause problems for tenancy contract? So he's asking about co-working space.
Yeah, co-working space is again an emerging trend which was riding over the fact that there's a lot of supply of offices. It lends itself to as a solution for small startups. And this is also emerging because of a trend where a lot of people were losing their jobs. Companies were downsizing. A lot of people love Dubai and the lifestyle in Dubai. They've gained experience in Dubai. They didn't want to leave, so they decided to start their own companies. And to help these companies, there were a lot of incentives and a lot of policies created. One of them is the co-working space. So I think it's a very legal operation. It's regulated.
And you get a license.
They get the license. They're actually now opening also in most of the free zones.
Yes.
I was actually meeting the IFC recently, and they have the IFC FinTech Hive. They have a lot of office opportunities for new startups.
And even Expo 2020, the site itself, District 2020, will have a
Co-working space. Correct.
So welcome to Dubai, and we hope that you bring value added to the project. 2 more questions and we finish. Alia asking, where is the highest ROI now in Dubai?
For rental, for
ROI,
for just long-term
I
sale,
think it doesn't
ROI,
matter.
what?
I think just to clarify something, when you say return on investment, it's 2 things. One is the rental yields, and the other is the capital
Yeah,
appreciation.
exactly. Right.
So
I mean, I already said from our data, the rental, the best rental yields you're going to get, we see is international city, right? Right. So it's,
In terms of capital appreciation?
Also in the outer rings, I personally don't like International City for different reasons. Maybe we need another discussion about it. But there are so many other new lucrative pockets in the outer rings that represent great opportunities for capital appreciation and rental yields.
Question from Yash. What is the expectation on the Valley project on Dubai Al Ain? I don't think we will answer specific questions, right, on certain projects. We don't want to go into that. But I have a question, and maybe we end up with this question. A lot of people think about the starting cost of buying a property. It's 1 million, it's 2 million. But very few think about the service charge and the running cost. What's your advice in terms of how do we find such information?
I think, and the last thing I want to close with is that the most important investment anybody would make is investing in their selves and building their knowledge. So before buying a property, educate yourself. Understand the 25 criteria I mentioned earlier that are involved whenever you want to buy a property. And definitely one of them is the cost of ownership after you buy a property. So service charges is an integral element that you must take into consideration when buying a property. It's part of the cost of owning that property, which involves your property management fees, maintenance fees, service charges to manage the common areas, the taxes, so many elements that you need to take into consideration. So don't take it lightly at all. Educate yourself to know the impact on your venture.
Great advice. What's your advice?
And for the education, you come to Bayut.
Yes.
We've written a lot of guides about communities, and we've written a lot of building guides, and we've taken a lot of data that's available through the land department. And thank you for sharing that. And we've incorporated that into the guides where we talk about the exact specific breakdown of the service charges, right? So understand not only the service charges, but what are the service charges for? It's absolutely critical that when you buy, you don't buy something that that you're married to now, right? You buy something that you can afford, right? So you have to make that calculation, right? And it needs to be part of your finances.
So many questions, great answers. I want to remind you about one thing. We've done this for 6-7 months, so you'll find in the library of Bayut the previous episodes. Please look at them. There's so many great ideas, guidelines. Location is the real estate slogan, but I want to say also knowledge. This is 2020 slogan. So, Mohanad AlWadiya, Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud, and thank you to Bayut for hosting
Haider,
this.
thank you so much.
Thank you guys, it's a pleasure. You're always welcome. And,
The 1 hour
thank
is
you for
over,
listening.
so I'm sure we'll have more episodes in the coming few months.